So listen, one of the best pastors in Tulsa, besides me, one of the best pastors in Tulsa, I'm joking, is Tom Harrison at Asbury United Methodist Church. He is just a jewel of Tulsa. Has been at Asbury, I think, since 1993. And Asbury United Methodist, it's a mega church, but he's a very down-to-earth, humble pastor. He calls every member on their birthday. I'm not going to do that here, so if you were looking for that, that's a lot of work, but he calls every member on their birthday. But here's my favorite thing about Tom Harrison, that when I ask him for a book recommendation, he is always spot on. I mean, in the 20 years I've known him, I've probably, asked him as many times, hey, what are you reading these days? And every time, he has yet to fail me, he gives a fantastic recommendation. Most recently, a book by Rich DeVinny called Attributes. And it's written from the standpoint of a Navy SEAL. Now, Rich DeVinny was not only a Navy SEAL, but he trained Navy SEALs. And he discovered the secret sauce to success as a Navy SEAL and really at anything in life. He said, it's not about what's on your resume. It's not about your qualifications. It's about your attributes. It's not about what you know how to do. It really does come down to who you are. And so in this book, he's identified a couple of dozen attributes to be successful not only as a Navy SEAL, but to make it through life. One of those attributes is having a sense of humor. That if you can have a sense of humor, you can pretty much pivot and handle whatever happens in life. And he gives this illustration back from when he was in the school for Navy SEALs. They were in Hell Week, and Hell Week is designed to get as many Navy SEAL candidates to drop out as possible. It's an entire week. You go without much eating. You sleep maybe 3 hours all week. You work nonstop. You're in the surf. You're hot. You're cold. There is no comfort during that week. And all you have to do to opt out is to go up on this little knoll and ring a bell. As soon as you ring that bell, you're out. But you also don't have to work anymore. And so it's designed, about half of the Navy SEALs that go through Hell Week wash out at that point. So Rich DeVinny is telling the story about his experience in Hell Week. They're doing surf training. They're cold all night long. He said every minute felt like an hour. Every hour felt like a day. And the Naval SEAL instructor up by the bell said, he was taunting his recruits. He said, come on up, guys. We have warm blankets up here. We have hot coffee. We have fresh donuts. All you have to do is come up and ring this bell. And the gentleman next to Rich DeVinny, his fellow candidate, said, do you have chocolate-covered donuts? Because I'm not coming up there unless you have chocolate-covered donuts. And his friend laughed, and he laughed. He noticed the Naval SEAL candidate next to him didn't laugh. 5 minutes later, somebody rang the bell. You know who that was? This guy here who had lost his sense of humor. We might Christianize this just a bit and say one of the things we need to make it through life is something called joy. And I still get a letter maybe once a year, not nearly like when I first came here 2,100 years ago, but maybe about once a year I'll get a note that says something like this: we use too much humor in church. Are you kidding me? Friends, Jesus Christ is alive from the dead. What is there not to be joyful about? Right. Come on. Thank you. I had to prompt the first service a second time, to do that. But if Jesus Christ is alive, all is well, and there's much joy to be had. And I'm convinced that the people who have lost their joy are either self-centered or self-righteous. So Jesus had this amazing ability. He had this amazing bandwidth for joy, even as he got ready to face his own Hell Week, the Passion Week, as he approached the cross. And that's where we find ourselves in Luke 14. And it's also a moment where the self-righteous people had lost all their joy. So if you read Luke 14, again, the cross is right around the corner. Jesus is invited to a banquet. And at this banquet, there's someone who's sick. And so Jesus heals this sick person. They evidently were retaining a lot of fluid, and their body was swollen. They were miserable all the time. They were achy all the time, and Jesus healed this person. Well, all the self-righteous people without joy said, well, it's okay that Jesus would heal, but he shouldn't do that on the Sabbath. Sabbath was a day where you didn't work, and healing was associated with work. And so here these self-righteous people just suck the joy out of the room. You see, they were watching Jesus. They were watching him not to imitate him, but to intimidate him. Well, that didn't go well. But what these people didn't know is that Jesus was watching them as well. And Jesus had seen the way that they'd come in for this banquet, and everyone was doing this mad scramble for seats. We'll talk about that here in just a moment. And so what Jesus does, in the face of people who had lost their sense of humor, who had lost any sense of joy, Jesus tells a story. In fact, not only does he tell one story, he tells two stories that take place at a banquet, that take place at a meal. And what Jesus is talking about is how to have joy as we serve others. And what you're going to notice, we're going to walk through these parables here in just a moment. Where they differ is kind of the setting. One, you're just attending a banquet. The other, you're hosting the banquet. So one, you're not in charge. The second one, you are in charge. The first one, you need to lead in the way you serve. The second one, you need to serve in the way you lead. So let's go to this. This is Luke chapter 14, and it's verse 7 where we're going to start. Jesus told a parable to those who are invited, and this is right after his healing. So, not a lot of joy in the room, but he told a story to those who were invited. He noticed how they would choose the best places for themselves. Let me set this up, because in the ancient world, the table wouldn't be tall legs. It would be a low-slung table in a U shape, and the host would sit at the head of the table, the head of the U. And so the best places were to the right and the left. Those were the most distinguished places for the host. And as you went down toward the U sides of the table, there were the less distinguished people until the very last ones were way out there. Okay? So there's a mad scramble for the best seats. Jesus tells the first parable. When you are invited, again, you're just attending, you're being hosted, you're not in charge. When you're invited by someone to a wedding banquet, don't recline at the best place. Because a more distinct, I need to stop here for just a minute. I'm planning a wedding banquet right now. This makes sense to me, okay? So here's the deal. My wife and my daughter are spending an agonizing amount of time talking about seating charts right now, okay? And so I'm overhearing these conversations. We're renovating our house right now. As a side note, can I encourage you, don't renovate your house and plan a wedding at the same time. Not good, okay? But I'm working on drywall while they're planning the seating chart, and they've not appreciated my recommendation. Forget the seating chart. Let's just line everyone else up behind a tape. Let's do a miniature Oklahoma land run type thing where we just fire a gun and everyone runs out at the seat. Guys, doesn't that sound good? I like it. They voted me down, okay? So there's this mad scramble going on. You're invited to a wedding banquet. Don't scramble for the best places, because a more distinguished person than you may also have been invited. The one who invited both of you may come to you and say to you, give your place to this man, and then in humiliation you'll proceed to the lowest place. But when you're invited, go and recline at the lowest place. So when the one who invited you comes, he will say to you, friend, move up higher. Then you'll be honored in the presence of all the other guests. For everyone who exalts himself will be humbled, and he who humbles himself will be exalted. How do we serve when we're not in charge? How do we serve when we don't control anything that's happening around us? I'm going to give you a little soundbite here, and I hope this sticks. When you don't control anything else, control yourself. When we're in situations where we don't control anything around us, control yourself. So now I want to put this in, take it out of the wedding banquet and put it where you live, because some of you right now are facing some harsh realities in life, and it could be the very thing that you see as an obstacle is an opportunity that God has put in your lap to serve. So let's say that you work in a toxic work environment. You work with a supervisor who is unreasonable, who is unreliable, who is unpredictable, and they've made your working life a bad place. When you're not in charge of anything else, when you're not in control of anything else, control yourself. It may be that God put you in that situation, saying, God, get me out of here. Maybe God put you in that situation so that you could serve that boss in a way that he's never been served before, or she's never been served before. or to serve your coworkers in a quiet, covert, and Christ-like way. When you aren't in control of anything else, control yourself. Look at the political world that we live in right now. Everything is polarized, right? Do you see this as an opportunity for us? And Christians, I want to encourage us, let's not be a part of the polarization. It's not right. It's not healthy. It could be that God has put us here in this time to serve others well. I had this idea during election season, and I just could not figure out a way to flesh this out. For us to intentionally, as Jesus followers, do something of service to people who are on the other side of the political aisle. I just couldn't nail down what that would be. If you've got some ideas, another election will be coming up. You see, we don't control what happens in the political environment, but where we don't control anything else, we are called to control ourselves. And controlling ourselves means we look for a way to serve. Everyone's competing over the front seats. Let's compete over the seats that no one else wants to take. And typically, that's in the place of serving. When you don't control anything else, control yourself. Would you agree with this, that the world doesn't need another single celebrity? We don't need any more celebrities. But the world needs a lot more servants. So Mary Claire King, probably not a name that you readily recognize, but you know her work. Mary Claire King was very instrumental in discovering cures for breast cancer. And this was several years ago, several decades ago. She was going off to a foreign city to meet with the National Institutes of Health to get a research grant. This grant would enable her to make the breakthroughs that she would make later on. So she's in the airport. She's getting ready to travel. She's with her young baby daughter. And there in line, waiting for her plane, she got a call from the other end that all of her babysitting, things that she had lined up to watch her daughter on the other end, had fallen through. And now she potentially had to cancel her trip because no one was there to watch her daughter while she went to meet with the National Institutes of Health. Well, a few people in line behind her was a man, a 67-year-old man. He stepped forward and he said, "Well, you and I are traveling to the same city. Why don't I watch your daughter?" Now, if you were me, I wouldn't let that guy near my daughter with a 10-foot pole. Yeah. Unless that person was Joe DiMaggio. Remember Joltin' Joe? This was several years ago. He had been retired from baseball for 30 years, but he was 67 years old. He was standing in line. He heard this woman's plight and said, "I'll watch your daughter." She recognized him instantly as Joe DiMaggio. She said yes. They went off. They traveled together. He babysat her daughter. She got the grant that would enable her to discover the breast cancer gene, BRCA1, that many of you have taken advantage of today. So while I think of Joe DiMaggio as a great Hall of Famer, you know what's even better? He knew how to help. He knew how to serve. When you can't control anything else, control yourself. Serve. Now, Jesus is going to tell another parable here. This parable is different now. This time, you're not a guest, you're the host. Instead of not being in charge, you are in charge. Okay? Instead of leading by the way you serve, now is an opportunity to serve in the way that you lead. So this is verse 12 of Luke 14. So he said to the one who had invited him, Jesus is speaking to the host, "When you give a lunch or a dinner, don't invite your friends, your brothers, your sisters, your relatives, your rich neighbors, because they will quid pro quo, because they will invite you back, and you will be repaid. On the contrary, when you host a banquet, invite those who are poor, maimed, lame, blind, and you'll be blessed, because they cannot repay you, for you will be repaid at the resurrection of the righteous." So again, the first parable is how to serve when you're not in control. You can't control anything else, control yourself. Just serve. Now you are in control. How do you serve when you're in a leadership position? And forgive me, I'm going to give you another little soundbite here, but I think it helps this idea just to stick. Don't make a big deal, just be the real deal. When it comes to doing the right thing, don't make a big deal. Just be the real deal. You don't have to post about it. You don't have to make a grand proclamation. You don't have to show everyone else this is the way it ought to be done. Instead of posting about it, just practice humble service. Can I put it another way? Get off Facebook and actually do something face-to-face and serve somebody else. What happens when we just start living the kind of life that Christ invites us to, what we do is inadvertently we model it for other people. I will never forget my seminary professor, my mentor, Calvin Miller. The first time I heard him speak in a seminary chapel and I saw the way that he interacted with students, I said, I don't know how he does what he does, but I want to do that. Whatever that is, he opened up new possibilities about what it meant to be a communicator and a pastor and a follower of Jesus, things that I'd never seen before. He opened up possibilities for me. That falls to those of us who are in leadership positions. Instead of just making a big deal about everything we do, the world has enough proclamations. Practice your faith. If other people see and observe and it opens up possibilities, good. If nobody else sees, it doesn't matter. You're still living your life dead level best as you know how to as a follower of Jesus. Don't make a big deal. Just be the real deal. And it will have more impact and more influence than you would ever think possible. Because that kind of living is contagious. D.L. Moody was a 19th century evangelist. He was kind of the Billy Graham of his day. And he invited a group of pastors over from Europe to come over and spend about a month with him at a conference. And so they came all the way from the continent over to Cambridge, Massachusetts. And it was tradition in European circles that when you stayed at a lodge or a hotel or something like that, then Europeans were used to putting their shoes out in front of their hotel room at night, and their dirty shoes, and leave them out there, and a servant boy would come through in the night and shine all the shoes and put them out in front of your door so that when you woke up the next morning, you had freshly shined shoes. Well, that was Europe, not Cambridge. So all these European pastors came over, and sure enough, that first night, all these pastors had put their shoes out in front of their doors, and D.L. Moody found out about this, and he didn't want to embarrass them for their cultural insensitivity. He didn't want to rebuke them for their presumption. So you know what he did? Here's the Billy Graham of his day. He went around that night and collected all the shoes, took them back to his room, shined them all, and then put them out in front of the doors fresh for the next morning. One of the other pastors learned about this, and so he helped D.L. Moody the next night shine all the shoes. And then what began over the next several days was a conspiracy of kindness that all these pastors shined one another's shoes. I expect my staff to shine my shoes tomorrow. I'm just saying, it just feels like that's it. That's what should happen. A conspiracy of kindness began because servanthood was modeled. So for those of you who are in charge, who are in leadership positions, and I want you to think about your families, I want you to think about your classrooms, your workplaces, your associations. Now, if you're not in charge, if you're not in control, control yourself. But when you are in charge, don't make a big deal. Just be the real deal. And Jesus promises ample reward. So, I didn't mean to do this morning. I didn't mean to use a couple of baseball stories, but it just so happened to work out this way. I talked about Joe DiMaggio here just a moment ago. Many of you might remember the name Jim Abbott. Jim was a baseball player back in the day, in the 1990s. He was born with one arm. He was born with only his left arm. And he learned rather early in life how to field and throw with the same hand. Isn't that interesting? He would field the ball with his glove, put the glove in his armpit, take the ball out and field it. And he got really fast and really good at that. When he became a pitcher, actually pitched a no-hitter in Yankee Stadium in 1993. Growing up, though, while he excelled at baseball, there's one thing he couldn't figure out how to do, and that was tie his shoes. His mom would tie his shoes in the morning, but then how does a one-armed kid tie his shoe in the middle of the day when his shoelaces becomes untied? That's where his third grade teacher, Don Clarkson, comes in. You've never heard of Don Clarkson. Nobody has, except Jim Abbott. Don Clarkson, his third grade teacher, went home every night and didn't announce this to anybody. He just with one hand, although he had two hands, he tried to figure out how to tie his shoelaces with one hand. And after about a month, he came back to school and said, Jimmy, I figured it out. Let me show you how to tie your shoes using one hand. Third grade teacher, that wasn't his job description, but he did it anyway. So now, years later, Jim Abbott's retired from baseball. He still goes around and speaks to colleges and universities and grade schools, and he'll talk to kids about achieving athletic ability, even with some disabilities. But always be on the lookout for that one-armed kid or the one-handed kid. And he'll pull them aside and say, in case you don't know, let me teach you how to tie your shoes with one hand. Or you could buy Velcro shoes these days. You know, times have changed a little bit. I shouldn't have said that. Yeah. But Jim Abbott had something modeled for him that has stuck with him all these years. Service over success. If I were to sum up everything in this, I would just kind of sum it up just like this. Don't be too good to do good. Don't be too good to do good. When you can't control anything else, control yourself. And when you are in charge, don't make a big deal. Just be a real deal. And if we need a model for servanthood, if we need an inspiration, one thing we ought to look to is right here. Jesus Christ, who is the servant of all and the servant of us. And so what do? We serve him and we serve others in his name. Let's pray together. Lord, I think we would all agree that the world does not need any more celebrities. But the world needs all the servants it can find. And so I pray that for those of us here who are in a situation where they don't control anything else, would you help us to control ourselves and to surrender ourselves to you, for you to use us even in very unpleasant places? I pray for those who are in charge, that they're endowed with responsibility and oversight and care for others. Would you help us be the real deal? Because as we lead, we have the opportunity to reflect Christ to a hurting world. Help us to not be too good to do good. And as we see Jesus, you on the cross, and you emerging from the grave, you are the servant of all. What are we waiting for? I pray that you would give each of us this week an opportunity to serve someone else, maybe in a significant way, maybe in a simple way, but we will serve them in your name. This is our prayer in Jesus' name. Amen. Now, may you develop as a Jesus follower this week. May you be a difference maker for a world of people far from God. And may the Lord bless you and keep you and make his face to shine upon you now and forever. Amen. Let's bless God together.